Hello there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, where the saying to be seen is to be understood comes to life. I want to begin by first honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. I live and work on Gundungurra land, and I acknowledge the traditional landowners of my guests near and far. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and cultures of our First Nations people. The land below my feet is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm no stranger to the profound journey of pain, grief, anger, and heartbreak that often accompanies the loss of church, community, faith, and the unwinding of our core beliefs. In the midst of this, though, I found healing in the stories shared by others who walked a similar path to me. Here in the warmth of these digital walls, I want you to feel at home. This is a space where your memories and your story is not just acknowledged, but deeply seen and believed. So kick back, relax, and let's embark on a journey where your story is not just heard, but embraced. I want to welcome you to a community where storytelling is a powerful force. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Brad. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
Whereabouts in the US are you?
New York.
Oh, nice. That is nice. I've not been to the US, but New York is, I'm a musical theater nut. So New York is like pretty high up on my list of, being able to go to Broadway and all of that sort of thing.
You would love it if you're
Yeah.
a theater nut or anything like that.
Yes.
It's the place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have been following you on Instagram for quite some time.
Uh-oh.
Tell me, and I have been wondering, and you probably have talked about it, and I may have just missed it. But for those who don't follow you on Instagram, tell us about the pipe and why it is very heavily featured. Before we sort of jump into the nitty-gritty of your story, let's start with something nice and light. Tell us about the pipe.
The pipe started about 25 years ago.
Nice.
It became, I don't know if I was inspired because of like C.S. Lewis or Tolkien or all of them, but it kind of came into play, and it was kind of it was something that was personally me.
Yeah.
There's also a little bit of for lack of better ways to put it, rebellion spiritually, because being a Southern Baptist, a former Southern Baptist, you don't see like the pipe smokers, right?
No.
And it doesn't matter that you don't inhale a pipe, because you don't. But it was just that act of saying, no, this is I'm creating a little bit of my own personal identity,
Okay.
right? In the midst of a very conservative religious upbringing.
Okay.
Right. And so it was me rebelliously pushing the mold, or breaking the mold, I guess you could say. And I happen to really like it. It's kind of a meditative thing. I mean, you don't ever see somebody angry with a pipe in their hand usually, right? I mean, they're calm. You can see somebody with a cigar and they can be angry, right?
Yeah.
But with just kind of like, let me get contemplative. Let me think about that. And so when I started the Instagram account, I thought, you know what? Whether or not people get offended or not, I don't know, but this is me.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you follow the Naked Pastor at all.
Yeah.
I did an interview with the Naked Pastor, and we talked, and I asked him, I go, listen, I go, would you mind creating like a sketch for me? And
Yeah.
that's not my profile pic.
Oh, yes. It's
It's
so
my pipe
great.
that he created. So it's just kind of me.
I love that. Oh, David's great. Um, I love that. I guess it reminds me, I guess, of when people sort of perhaps leave a conservative experience and, they get a tattoo or they dye their hair a certain color or they do all of those things that sort of just like
start to slowly bring out, I guess, who they are in an authentic way as opposed to everything that they were supposed to be. I love that.
It's a self-discovery, right?
Yeah.
And there's it's one of those things that, for those of us that are growing up in religious circles, a lot of times we don't even get to be who we thought we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so this was probably the first step of deconstructing for me. Or it was called deconstruction. We're talking about 1998. Right. So
yeah.
And so it was one of those things that I just I would go and I do alone, because at that time I didn't know anyone else that was a pipe smoker. But it was just me.
Yeah.
So that's the very brief history of the pipe.
I love that.
Collect pipes. I collect, tobacco. It's just me. I've been called, like, on Instagram, I interviewed someone, they called me a pipe witch. Right.
My goodness.
Yeah, because it's like there's water witches, there's
right.
Nature witches, as they call, like, all these different, they go, you're a pipe witch. I'm like, okay.
There's worse things you could be called, right?
Exactly. I've been called worse things, right? So it's all good.
Oh gosh, that's great. I mean, okay, so you've sort of alluded to a couple of things, and I actually didn't realize that perhaps the process of deconstruction, which that's what we call it now, but it's, like you said, back in 1998, did you say? It wouldn't have been called deconstruction at that point. That language is relatively new. And so where does your story start?
With deconstructing?
With wherever you want it to. Where does it start?
Well, I'll give you a very brief start to the story. So, middle child here, people pleaser.
Okay.
Perfect scenario for religion, right? Longing to be accepted, longing to be loved. Grew up in the church, Southern Baptist, did the whole accept Jesus as Lord and Savior at age 8.
Okay. Now, for those who don't know, because I tend to talk about the US and Australia have very different religious landscapes. The US is like, I think in Tim's episode, I was like, it's a bit of a shit show over there, isn't it? Like, it is just like, I think for anybody who is not in the US, it is a bit mind-boggling just how immersed in every facet of life it is. So when you say Southern Baptist, what does that mean?
Conservative.
Right.
You're in a box.
Okay.
You don't think outside that box. You see that a lot of conservatives, like you see on TV today, the far right, politically, it literally seeps into every aspect of your life.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why when we talk about deconstruction, we talk about not just whether or not you believe the Bible, but deconstruction is, how has it impacted your so-called worldview, your values, your system, who you marry, what you eat, how you think, everything. Your identity is no longer yours. It's what they call being wrapped up in Christ or Jesus.
Yeah.
And so anything you do, the only good thing you can do is that which is God working through you, that you yourself do not have value except that which God places upon you.
You're just a vessel, right?
Right.
Yes. Okay. So what was it like for you growing up in that environment?
Well, because I never wanted to rock the boat.
Okay.
Right? Because I wanted love. And so I was going to be obedient. I was going to follow the rules. And there are a lot of rules, whether or not I say it's rules, they're rules.
Yes.
And I followed the path to which got me or produced what I thought was love,
Mm.
to a God that I thought had the cornerstone on what love was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I followed that. And mentally, what people may not understand, that are listening to this that don't know a lot about deconstructing, is churches grab children when they're younger, and there are a few things they're told, whether through stories or something else. It's number one, you're sinful.
Mm.
Number two, you're sinful, but don't worry, God created the heavens and the earth and has a plan for your life. Number three, because you're sinful, even though you may not understand what that is, because remember, children have no cognitive ability to critically think.
Yeah.
And so because you're sinful, you're going to hell unless you ask Jesus into your heart and give your life over to God.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, then there's a good chance, because you're in church, that you will spend eternity away from your parents.
Mm.
Right? And that there's nothing good that you can do, but only when Jesus lives in your heart can goodness come out of you, right? Or work through you.
Yeah.
And so as a child, those brain waves are molded and shaped and designed in such a way that that you start processing quickly. Okay, A equals B, and there's nothing else, no other ways to think outside of that.
Yeah.
And if you question, you're labeled as a troublemaker, right? I mean, those are evil questions, or those are sinful questions, or hey, those are selfish, like
Yes.
pride's bad, certain emotions are bad. And so you are molded and shaped as you're young based upon that. So when you get older, it's very difficult for somebody that's deconstructing to break through those things, because you have to literally recircuit or re-hotwire your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, from I guess, like, I look at these sorts of situations through a therapist lens, and I go, those neural pathways are like thick from the beginning. They are like really strengthening them up, and then to dismantle that, to rewire it, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. That's for sure. It can take decades for that to happen, because it is not just something you were taught, it's who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. It's exactly who you are. And so I followed that. I accepted my calling into ministry. Went to Christian college. And when I was leaving Christian college, there were some things that didn't sit well with me. And I didn't like the way women were perceived in the Bible, or how they were treated within marriage. And I was really grappling with God's sovereignty, omnipotence, as well as God himself. And so my deconstruction journey started there without really realizing it.
Yeah.
I always had this inkling that, hey, is there something else? But because I was such a follower, people pleaser, and because I was programmed to, I'd say, hey, those are tests of my faith. They have all these key words and
spiritual warfare.
Yes. Keep you on the path, right? And so when I got married at a time, I was not a very good Southern Baptist. I went to seminary, right? And I got my master's degree at seminary and went into the ministry. Was in it for 20 plus years as a pastor. But in that process, those chinks in that armor, I guess you could say, started kind of showing. And the deconstruction took a full tilt, fast forward through when my past wife and I went through a miscarriage.
Okay.
And I could not understand God anymore at that time.
Yeah.
things didn't make sense. And then it just continued to grow from there. But
Yeah.
as a pastor, it's not like you can talk to anybody else in the church about it.
Yeah, because you're the top of the chain, right? So you're
Right.
supposed to have a direct line to God. So why would you be going through suffering?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Why would you be going through suffering? Why would you have these doubts? How
Yeah.
dare you question God?
Yeah.
It's like that Job, how dare you, like, and he never
Mm,
gives Job an answer. It's all those things. And I never got any answers.
yeah.
Uh, and remember back in my day, if you want to talk, we didn't have the internet as convenient as it is now,
Mm,
right? And so you didn't have Instagram, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have other people you could kind of reach out to.
mm.
And far be it from me to ever go to a counselor or a therapist that wasn't a
Yeah.
Christian counselor, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it was a little bit more of that. I spent a lot of time within myself.
Mm, yeah. What was it like having so many of those questions, having nowhere to go with those questions, but everybody coming to you with their questions and you having to sort of have the answers for them when you don't even have the answers for yourself?
Torture.
Yeah.
I guess internal conflict and torture, because there's that part of me that's been trained, since we talked about, ever since I was a kid.
Mm,
Neural pathways always led to one specific result or end result.
yeah.
Okay. And it was always the godly result, right?
Mhm.
As they said. And anything outside that was wrong. So it was a lot of like, man, what am I doing? Like, this is a me problem,
Yeah.
right? This is obviously my fault some way,
Mm,
right? So, it's a lot of staying up late at night and journaling, going
yeah.
on walks and journaling. And if you were to read my journals, which I hope you never do, which would be terrible, you will see a lot of anger and
Mm,
confusion with my relationship at that time with the biblical God.
yeah. Was it anger at God or was it anger at yourself almost because you felt like there must be something wrong with me? Like, why, is my devotion not enough? Am I not doing enough? Or was it anger at God? Or both?
It was both.
Yeah.
It was that, okay, you have the answers. Why are you not giving them to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why haven't you shown up?
Mm,
For a lack of better way to put it, that there's that song by the Fray, I think it was, is like, where were you?
yeah.
Meeting God underneath the lamppost, smoking his last cigarette, right? It was
Yeah.
a lot of like, well, where are you?
Yeah.
I don't hear you. I don't see you. I don't see you interacting or interjecting
Mm,
yourself into life at this point. Are you absentee landlord? Where are you?
yeah. At what point did you leave the church? How did that happen? Now, I know a little bit of how that happened, but tell us, I guess, a more full picture of how that happened.
Well, as I continued on, right before COVID hit, I'd come to the conclusion in my mind, and through me personally, that homosexuality wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I bet that went down well.
Oh, well, that's not something you share right off the bat,
Oh,
right?
no.
Mm-mm. Especially when you've got two younger kids,
Yeah.
about 13 and 15, and you realize that, okay, can we make it financially if I say this? Because
Yeah.
you're out, period,
Yeah.
of the church. Right?
Yeah.
And so I was really wrestling with that. Thankfully, my ex-wife as well was deconstructing, and she may have been a
Okay.
little bit further along than me. But what happened was I'd gotten to the point where I didn't think it was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And And lo and behold, I'm in a church. Now, when I say pastor, I've preached on stage, stuff like that, but I never wanted to be like the preaching pastor, right?
Okay.
I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've held all, I mean, every facet within the church you can hold, right? So at that time, I was the family life pastor. And so I oversaw the children's ministry area and all the workers there and employees. And I oversaw the student ministry and the employees. And I oversaw the, young adults at that point, right? So wasn't a large church. It was only about 2,500. And so I oversaw them. And I remember one Sunday morning, the small group that my daughter was in, some parents and some workers came up to me and said, "Hey, listen, we want you to know we're praying for your daughter." And I'm like, "Did something happen? Did she hit her head? Is it an injury? Where do I need to be?"
How old is your daughter at this point?
My daughter at that point, I believe, was 13.
Okay. Yep.
Right. And they go, "Well, she came out and told everybody she was a lesbian."
Okay.
No idea.
Hence the prayers.
Right. Yeah. And
Okay.
they basically trying to help fix her. Right. Basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
My immediate knee-jerk reaction, and still is like, she doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Right. And it became very clear at that time, amongst some other things that were going on, there was also a controversy not long after that about some abuse towards a female worker that was swept under the rug, stuff like that. To which I got caught up because I was one of those who called it out. So anyways, so I knew at that point it was either my daughter or the church. And it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
I was like, this is my daughter, totally. But that means my life as a pastor is done.
Yeah.
So everything kind of came to a head. It had worked for the last, 25 years up to that point, but everything came to a head. And so I knew it was time. I knew it was over. So, not long after that, I was signing an NDA. Of course, I'm the only one that I've ever known of the people that have left that signed an NDA or had to, right? But, and so I signed an NDA and got my 3 months severance. Right. And then, okay, well, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to survive? And so I had to start over.
Oh my goodness.
So, so there it is. I started over, which means, and it's not like I'm going back into ministry. It's like all of that is done. And I took a year and I studied and I read all the things I was never allowed to read.
Yeah.
Right. And
I did the same.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's like, oh, this is nice.
And I didn't tell anyone really, what was going on. Right.
Yeah.
So I spent all that time reading, studying, loving what I was learning and thinking, oh my God, you kind of feel like you've been lied to or you were deceived, all those typical things that people that are deconstruction going through. Right. There's anger, there's all of this. And finally, after about a year, I'm like, okay, I'm ready now to say where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so I sent a letter to, email to my closest, family, friends and said, hey, this is the deal. And then on Facebook, I'm just one of those people that say, hey, listen, you're either going to love me or not, which is really difficult for a people pleaser.
Yes.
Right? And I said, listen, I am no longer classifying myself as a Christian. Oh my goodness.
Big call. Yeah.
That there were a couple of people that reached out in my DMs. Was like, hey, once I've had these same questions, what's going on. But the majority of people were either crying on my Facebook page, oh, please come back to the faith, yada, yada, yada. And I knew by doing that I was going to lose friends, but I didn't know I was going to lose everybody from before.
Yeah.
Including, my mom who hasn't talked to me for 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
I knew that bad things were going to happen in the way of relationships. And so basically anybody I knew before. There were a couple people that I still would consider friends. But the majority, all the collegians, all the people I ever had as a pastor, like that I worked with, I prayed with, everything gone. And the problem with being a pastor is nobody wants to ask you. It's like, what did he find out?
Like the elephant in the room, right? Everybody's just avoiding it.
Wait, this guy's been a Christian his whole life. He's been a pastor. We went to him for advice. Do we really want to know what exactly is going on?
Yeah.
And so largely it was silence.
Right. Okay. And I guess it's because, people, leave the church every day all around the world. But I guess there's a greater sense of gravity when somebody who was a pastor for a really long time goes, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. And you sort of go, ooh, that's not just somebody going, hey, I can't be bothered going to church anymore on a Sunday. Like, it is your whole life, and so, yeah, it's sort of like avoiding the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it goes further than the stupid idea that, hey, people are deconstructing just because they want to sin.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, no, these people, depending how invested they are in church, they're willing to leave everything.
Yeah.
And something that only Christians are supposed to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Follow Jesus, leave everything.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's this person that was a Christian, depending upon how you define it today, and they're leaving everything. And what now?
Yeah.
Do we really want to know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how do we manipulate this person to get him back? Because because there are I received a letter, from a dear friend of mine in the past who thought I left just because of Grace, my daughter, and her coming out.
Yeah.
That had a large part to do it, but that wasn't it. Right? There was more.
Yeah.
And so, no one really wants to think that there's more. So
yeah. I find that from the people that I've spoken to, the people who deconstruct the hardest are the ones who tend to have been the ones that were all in church. They weren't the people who just went, once a month or every now and then. They were the people that were there every Sunday, sometimes, multiple times a week, doing multiple forms of ministry and service. And they were all in, and suddenly they're not. And so if you're all in with something, you're going to be all in when you're out of something as well. It's not going to be as a simple process.
It's difficult with those people because you get your volunteers that are always there, and suddenly they'll walk away. And you've heard the phrase before, well, they were never Christians to begin with.
Oh, yes.
Right. It's challenging to hold that to those types of people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What was it like for you at that point that you sort of realized that your friendships and your relationships with these people were transactional almost? They were there when you were the person that they wanted you to be, or that they were comfortable with you being?
The first word that comes to mind is grief.
Yeah.
There was a significant, and still is at times, a grief. I don't think just kind of lets go, right? No. Especially for people deconstructing. I wrote a post the other night, chasing shadows, and it is different when you're called upon and you're wanted and you're needed to going to crickets. Now, as you said, being called upon and wanted, even though it was kind of false, transactional, hey, what can you do for me? We're paying your salary.
Yeah.
All those types of things. It still felt like something.
Yeah.
Right. And now there's nothing. Right. And so that grief and that saying, hey, I'm still trying to even discover who I am as a person.
Yeah.
Comes into play. And so you're never like people that are deconstructing, they're never prepared.
Mm.
They have an idea, but they're never prepared for everything. And that's because what we talked about earlier about all the emotions, the feelings, the way in which religion seeps into someone's life. Like I had to sit there and go, do I still like pumpkin pie? Do I like sports, or did I like them because they brought me some sort of friendships or something? What do I like? My view on marriage, is it the same? Is it different? Everything is in there that is being deconstructed.
I have a good friend who's also a religious trauma therapist who describes the lifelong process a bit like the whack-a-mole game, because you never quite know when something's going to pop up, because it's been so ingrained in you that something can come out of seemingly nowhere. You don't see it coming, and all of a sudden it's there and you have to deal with it.
And as a life coach, as a life coach, I can be talking to a client, helping a client get off perfectly fine, and then like Christmas time, a song can come on. It's like a trigger. And you have to learn to sit down for 10, 15 minutes, feel those feelings, because I think that they teach us. Right. I don't look at triggers as bad things, but teachers. Right. Of us getting in touch with ourselves. And so, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. And so learning to sit with that was difficult. Right. But when you can learn to sit with those things and those triggers and those feelings and emotions, and learn to kind of say, okay, I can accept this, but and then after 15 minutes, it's not going to ruin my day. It's okay. I felt that. It's valid. I learned from that. Let's continue to move forward. Right. And so, there's always going to be times, I think, for people that have deconstructed or are deconstructing, I should say, or that you're going to get knocked the wind out of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's okay, because I look at deconstruction as, I think David and I were talking about, the Naked Pastor and I were talking about it, and I learned from him. I don't look at deconstruction as blowing something up, more as like growing up and through. Things are falling off. Right. And so it's more of a frame. It's different than what was programmed before as a kid. To, okay, no, let's shift our perspective. With that.
Absolutely. And I think people tend to see deconstruction as crumbling, like everything sort of just breaks down or it crumbles or explodes. I actually don't often use the word deconstruction. I tend to use the word detangling, because I feel like once you detangle something, it expands and it gets bigger. And often I find that tends to happen. You know, your knowledge expands, your curiosity expands, your sense of spirituality can expand into different areas. But I want to ask something before we sort of get into more of the deconstruction, is what was it like for you as a dad to hear about your daughter coming out through someone else?
It wasn't bad.
Okay.
For me, I think because I know my daughter.
All
right. So my daughter, if she's going to go big, she's going to do something, she's going to go big.
Right. I love that.
I never had to worry about her following someone. She was always going to be the leader.
Right. Okay. Nice.
So it didn't bother me. It made sense.
Okay.
So it's like, okay.
Right.
That's okay. It was a greater understanding of her. And it allowed me to let her know how much that I loved her and cared for her. So we'd sat down at the table, especially when I left church, and I said, hey, listen, I go, your dad has had doubts about this for a long time, not about my daughter or her situation, or what she, what she said, but understand this, that my kids are more important than my profession. My kids are the most important thing in my life. And this, it was a no-brainer for me, but unfortunately with a lot of people that are my clients, they come from families that that push them away. Right. And so it was an opportunity for me to show my daughters, like, hey, you know what love is? It's this, not that. And so I will always support you. And so me leaving the church had a lot to do with me personally. But even if I wasn't having doubts about the church and my daughter had come out like that, I still would have left for her.
Yeah. Did that deepen your relationship with her?
Yeah, we've always had a close relationship. My son and daughter both, but I'd always taught them, and this was something that was interesting to me because I don't know if indirectly I was wrestling with things without Rochelle, but I never forced my religion upon my kids. I never wanted my so-called faith to be theirs.
Yeah.
I wanted them to critically think. And so we always had table time to where they were open to question or that. And I never made them feel bad for questioning or doubting or anything like that. I always tried to teach them to critically think. And if their faith became their faith, fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's the same way I treat my clients. It's like, I have no end goal for my clients. I don't want them to leave the church necessarily. It's not my call. I don't want them to become just spiritual. I don't want them to become atheist. I don't want them or anything like that. I want them to become who they are and true to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And I treat my kids the same way.
One of the hardest parts, I think, for me coming through that deconstruction process was realizing some of the systems or the beliefs that you upheld and the harm that I had done and inflicted on other people in my belief system and my faith in the way that came out. What is that like for you as a former pastor, having upheld that system for a really long time?
I think there was a lot of wrestling for me because I was like, okay, can I forgive myself?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can say, yeah, I didn't know any better. At least for me, I didn't. It's not like I planned to manipulate people or anything like that. I didn't plan to give them what people consider false doctrine or tell them the Bible's the truth when it's probably a lie, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was the way I was trained since I was a kid. I mourn, yeah, about that part. Sure. I think there's that. I think there's a part to where I'm kind of like I don't want to live in regret. And I mourn two things. One, that I followed the path as a people pleaser. And two, that I never got to experience or become what I could have became or become.
Yeah.
Right. What would I have been like without this? And so there's a two facet, at least, when it comes to say, hey, do I regret it? Do I do anything like that? And I think that, unfortunately, I think sometimes as much as you can go down that rabbit hole, there's never going to be the answer. Right. Because you're just kind of like, what ifs?
Yeah.
Right. What I resigned to is like, okay, what now? Right. What can I control?
Yeah.
Now, as opposed to, I can't go back and do it all over again. I was a kid, and there's got to be some so-called grace, if we want to use that word.
Yeah.
Mercy applied to anybody that's deconstructing that went through that. That there's got to be that self-love, self-care, forgiveness of self, to where you're just like, hey, if you're one of those people that just, you didn't purposely set out to harm people, that there needs to be that grace and mercy and of yourself. And they say, okay, now what? Yeah,
absolutely. I guess it goes back into that sort of cliche sort of saying of, when you know better, you do better. So it's that, what do I do now?
I've heard that an awful lot lately. And I have a dear friend who I love very much, who always says that line to me. And I hate it, but I love it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a challenging statement.
It is, because it makes you stop in your tracks.
Yeah.
And I'm so tired sometimes of doing better, right? Like, in the
Yeah,
sense
I
that,
know.
because what that implies is, okay, you done screwed up, right? And what it usually shows me is some sort of past, whether belief system or neural pathway that has been set that needs to change.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not something you want to know about yourself, right? I
No,
mean, like,
yeah.
you don't want to know that, but in learning those things, you just hope that the people around you, or, if you have solid people around you, give you that time to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. It is it's a confronting cliche
Oh my goodness.
that people
It's
say. Yeah.
it's like getting punched in the neck, and it's like,
Yeah.
you look like, thank you, may I have another, please?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
this is terrible.
Yeah.
When you have somebody like that in your life,
Mm,
willing to tell you those things, that's gold. Because coming from the church, coming from that, usually if you were told something like that, it's because you weren't doing something that they thought you should be doing spiritually.
yes. Yeah.
You're not becoming what
Holding
they
you
think.
accountable.
Right. They think you need to be different according to the way they think you should be different.
Yes, but disguised as I feel like God is telling me to tell you this.
Oh,
Yeah, it's disguised, I guess. Yeah.
terrible.
I joke now that anytime somebody in my congregation would send a message to say, "Hey, do you want to catch up for coffee?" It's like, oh yikes. Like, what have I done? What have they seen? Like, because you know what is coming is not just a general catch up and coffee. What is coming is either they want you to do something or you've done something and they're wanting to hold you accountable to it.
That's where boundaries became a huge play. Because after I left the church, I had to sit down and go, okay, who is allowed to speak into my life?
Yes. Yep.
And that's a very, very small list.
Yes, it is.
Very, like, a lot smaller than it's ever been before, right? So a very small list. Only those people get to.
Yeah. Now, I know that you speak quite openly about anxiety and panic attacks and things like that. How was your mental health through the deconstruction phase?
Up and down.
Yeah.
One of the things I did on the tail end of leaving the church and in that year plus was I found a therapist that was an atheist.
Nice.
Which I'd never done before.
They do exist. There are non-religious therapists out there.
And they're not evil, right? No. Right?
Yeah.
And because I wanted to go into a therapy session without somebody with the idea of what I needed to be in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's difficult, obviously, within a Christian.
Yeah.
If you can Christian counseling. So counseling, I mean. I spent a lot of time in therapy, and I still go to a therapist for checkups and everything. I mean, like, it's a constant work, right?
Yeah.
Even as I think all of my clients but one, since I've been life coaching, has had a therapist as well, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Right. I strongly encourage that.
Thanks for the little plug about my industry. I love this because
I have a tremendous amount of respect for therapists. As a matter of fact, I'm looking to go back and get my second master's and be a clinical mental health therapist as well. So I will start that in 2024.
Yeah.
And so anxiety is something that I started having or really start surfacing back in college. Panic attacks, stuff like that. And so but they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
right? They had no idea that they were panic attacks. They thought it was hypoglycemic. They thought this, they
Mm.
thought that, all these different things.
Yeah.
And so I actually, when the internet became more readily available, I researched and I diagnosed myself. And I walked into a doctor's office and said, hey, these are my symptoms.
Mm.
Once I'm able to tell me what it is, does this align? And they go, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense,
Oh,
right? Okay, I feel better knowing
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't remove like the triggers and a lot of them, or the anxiety or the panic, because a lot of those are so steeped within religion and my programming
Mm.
that it takes time,
Yeah.
right? And everything that. So I speak a lot on that because a lot of my clients as well struggle so much with the panic attacks, whether it's fear, because it's religion, I think, is fear-based,
Mm.
largely more than anything, especially conservative, right-wing, wherever you want to call it, here in America. So everything is fear-based. And so naturally fear is such a strong
Mm.
holder of the body. And, I'm sure you read this, the book, The Body Keeps a Score, and everything
Yeah.
that it's only you're getting in touch with your body and why this is happening, which leads to
Yeah.
a whole other realm of self-discovery,
Mm-hmm.
healing that needs to take place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all of those things that you are told when you are in the church and when you are in that sort of fundamentalist sort of environment that are, of the world and are sinful or are, deceitful. Feelings are deceitful, don't trust your own heart, don't trust your own body, only trust God. All of those, that sort of those platitudes that just further reinforce that disconnection from yourself.
Well, yeah, the Bible verse about the heart is deceptively wicked,
Yeah.
right? And you, because you can't trust yourself. That's what
Yeah.
you're told. So now when you are deconstructing, you leave the church, or you're on the verge of or learning self-discovery about yourself.
Mm.
And I don't use deconstruction because that's the
Yeah.
typical word, right?
Yeah.
It's that self-discovery. Say, no, my body, my mind is trying to tell me something,
Mm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this isn't just something to just shoo away and say, okay, this is sinful, I need to trust God more.
Mm.
Relying, my anxiety or my panic attacks are a sign of not trusting God,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Which total, I won't curse on your show,
Oh, you can
but
curse. It's fine.
well, I've been holding back, right? So
Yeah.
it's for lack of a better word, it's total bullshit,
Yeah.
right? Like, because what you're doing is you're basically dividing yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it's cognitive dissonance or whatever you want to call what's
Yeah.
going on, you're trying to say, okay, no, this is spiritual warfare, or this
Mm.
is evil. This is my fault
Yeah.
that I feel this. And that's a big problem with people that are going through this challenge.
Absolutely. And that's not coming just internally, that's coming externally as well. Spiritual bypassing is like rife through all churches, I think. Just give it to God. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If you trust him
That's
more,
apparently supposed to fix everything.
if you trust him more, it'd go away.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what that also does is when you leave the church, you have difficulty trusting your own judgment.
Yeah, I remember one of the biggest things that was like that I had to learn. I felt like I had no center of gravity. When you leave, like there was no. It was almost like I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I think. I don't know how I feel because everything is disconnected, and you've lost what I deemed as like my center of gravity. It was what kept me grounded. So when you take that away, that's it's destabilizing. You have no sense of anything all of a sudden, and to rebuild that takes time and a whole bunch of self-compassion.
Yeah, I mean, I hated the question at first. It's like, well, what's your foundation?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
aren't religious anymore. What is your foundation? And I had to wrestle with that because I was always taught morals are only achieved through religion.
Yeah.
Right. So I just simply, as love is my foundation, period.
Yeah.
And I had to grow from that.
Yeah. What brings you joy and peace now?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So first, distinguishing, let me ask you your definition of peace.
Well, what's your definition of peace?
I love it.
That's the therapist in me.
Well, that is totally a therapist response, right? Let's do the simple method here. So, totally, because in the past, peace was always God. Being God's will.
Yes.
Was peace.
Yep.
Right. And same thing with purpose. Like people always ask, well, I don't know what my purpose is, because purpose was always given to you by God.
Yes. Yep. I have a real visceral reaction to the word purpose. Because
I know, right?
all it just has a one track to the purpose driven life that was hammered in that book. Oh my goodness. I
Saddleback. That's exactly.
Yeah. So it's funny, there are words that you still sort of just have an automatic association. Yes. But sorry, continue with your
thing with peace though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that, oh my God, right? It's I hate that. So it's I tell my clients, it's you make your own purpose. Whatever you put your time and effort into, it creates purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Purpose is not given to you. It's what you give to something else. Right? You give it to yourself as well. And so as far as peace, purpose, becoming more myself, whatever that may be, from one day to another, is what gives me purpose, what gives me peace. If we had a third word, that would be a sermon.
Yeah.
Another P word. So, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We just need a poem at the end to wrap it all
Yeah,
up. But,
I know.
I think that the joy I have now, joy, there's another word, the happiness that I have now is being able to walk with someone and see them discovering freedom and being freed to be themselves.
Yeah.
And not apologetic about it, but confident about it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I put, my purpose towards right now, is that life coaching and soon therapy, right?
Yeah.
Being a therapist. And so, my comfort, we'll use comfort instead of peace. My comfort is learning and continue learning to love myself.
Yeah.
Right. And saying, hey, you know what? I like myself a little better today than I did yesterday.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, final question.
Okay.
What would you say to someone who is fresh out of church, fresh in that deconstruction phase, full of emotions, and has no idea what to do with anything? What would you say to that person?
Man. Well, I would tell them, first and foremost, take a breath. As difficult as you're going to want to accomplish so many things, and find so many answers that aren't going to be there right away.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because you come out of religion, they gave you all the answers. Right. Take a breath and realize it's going to be a journey, and it's okay for it to be a journey. It's okay for it to take time. It's okay for you to go at your pace. You don't go at anyone else's pace. And then I would tell them, and I hate to use the word encourage, because encourage is such a religious word.
Yeah.
But then I would let them know that it is important for you to find a safe space.
Yeah.
Okay, whether I would tell them therapy, but not a Christian therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I would just because I'm a life coach, because you and I serve two different purposes right now,
Yeah.
but looking for the same goal,
Mm.
right? You've been trained in certain ways that are so much needed for people that are in a crisis, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And then my job is I come alongside them and go, hey, I'm walking with you. Like I give all of my clients my phone number.
Yeah.
And they can hit me up anytime they need. So they know they're not alone. Right. So they're not alone. They've got a great therapist. They've got someone else that's not going to judge them, like a life coach that's going to walk with them through it.
Yeah.
And to say, hey, one step at a time, whether it's a crawl, a snail pace, whatever it is, celebrate the small joys or small things that are happiness in your life, and realize that it's probably, for the lack of a better way of putting it, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to put it that way, but when you're in self-discovery mode, when you're losing people, when you're missing community, everything that, and then finally, I know it sounds weird, but Instagram was a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, I would agree.
I found out there's a community out there of people that are going through what I'm going through, or what people of all deconstruction have gone through. Right. And to find reassurance that they're not alone in that way either.
Yeah. I love that. Find your people.
Yeah, really. And it's all about finding different people, right? And setting those boundaries, and and then just what's foreign is learning, and whether it's through therapy, life coaching, whatever it may be, through people online, learn to love yourself.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think, social media gets a bad rap, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot that we could probably throw out into the rubbish. But Instagram in particular put language to a lot of what I was feeling, because there were people out there who was, particularly in America, who were talking about it. I remember a couple of years ago, I think, the first few accounts that I found was the Happy Cara and Rachel, the Happy Hallway account, yours and Joy Vetterline, all of these people who had language to, the stuff that I was already going through. And so, your people may not be in your town. Your people may be online. They may be in a completely different country. But find your people. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed
this. It's been a great chat. Yeah.
It's gone way too fast.
I know. I looked at the clock and I was like, yikes, I need to start wrapping it up. But you are frequent on Instagram, so I will pop all of your details in the show notes. Make sure you head over. And you're always chatting on there with your pipe, which I love. I just love it. It's just like this image. But thank you so much for joining me.
I can't thank you enough for having me, and I hope we can talk again in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Surface. Until next time, take care, stay true to who you are, and remember, your voice and your story matters, always.